Hello, friends. We have a lot of skulls. They need eyes. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. When I was younger, my family used to travel a lot. I got to see most of the US, and many other countries. From most trips, I hold cherished and memorable experiences that I will never forget. However, one trip still plagues my mind and haunts my nightmares. As per usual our trips, I was spontaneously woken up at around 1 in the morning, given a single suitcase with a left in a 1-hour warning. A good few hours into the car ride, I read "Welcome to Michigan" and something about lakes, but it doesn't really matter. After what didn't feel like much longer, we were driving through a thick forest. It didn't even seem like we were on a road anymore. A few minutes pass and we pull up to an old, but well-kept, large wooden lodge. The sign out front read "La Casa Grande," which made me chuckle a little. But the name was certainly correct. The place was massive, and radiated a light orange glow from the setting sun. It was a quite beautiful place, but as soon as we pulled in, we were already walking in and getting our rooms figured out. As my parents dealt with the concierge, I began to wonder and look around the grand hall we were in. A grand chandelier made of wrought iron and horns lit the high ceiling, as the grand hearth gave a gentle glow to the floor, illuminating the face of a giant bear rug. I saw that the second story is where the rooms were, all along the balcony overlooking the grand hall. There were, I'd say, about 10 rooms above, most of which men of various ethnicities began rapidly pouring out of armed and appeared to be preparing for some sort of hunt. As the men walked down the stairs and out the front door, I hear an old man's voice from behind me whisper. I tried to warn them. They are looking for what they should not hope to find. His first words made me jump a little. Turning around to see an old, maybe 70s, Native American man. I quickly asked what they were hunting for. To which he had me come close, and I could feel his breath as he said they are looking for the Skinwalker that killed their dogs outside. However, they believe it to be some great wolf. May the gods watch over them. I looked puzzled after hearing the word Skinwalker and asked what it was. He immediately hushed me upon starting the word, and said, "Do not say their name, nor think of their existence, only then will they know of you." Later that night as I was sitting in my room, my parents a single door down the hall, I couldn't get the skin monster out of my head. I began Googling it on my smartphone, watching YouTube videos about it. Just about everything about that would classify as thinking about it. Eventually, I fell asleep, after scaring myself into slumber. Later in the night, I was woken up by a cold wind, whispering into my room, creating a whistling noise. I noticed my window was open, and so I got up to close it. As I approached I noticed 4 large, roughly 2-inch deep claw marks into the wooden windowsill. My heart completely sunk into my stomach and I froze. I stood there for a few minutes and as the wind died down I could hear breathing from just outside my window. A deep, growling breath. The only way to describe it as it sounded painful, and yet angry, agitated. I could hear myself shaking the floorboards beneath my feet in fear. I reached a single hand out to close the window, with hopes that wherever he had left. But when my arm was a few inches from the window, I noticed a large, black claw, oozing a glistening black, tar-like liquid reach around, one after the other. Within a few seconds, the marks on the windowsill were again filled. I turned and ran for the door, hearing a loud screech behind me followed by heavy movement trying to force itself through the window. I slammed the door behind me and pushed a small table to block the door. Upon turning around, I noticed the old Native American man sitting in the same chair in the grand hall as before. I called down to him, crying and pleading for help. No one else even slightly perturbed by any of the commotions. I stared at the man who was facing the fireplace. I noticed, however, a large sadistic grin stretching across his wrinkly face. His head alone started to turn up towards me, the same expression as before. I again felt extremely cold, with the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I hear an ear-piercing bell as the grandfather clock dings the midnight bell. It caused my ears to ring as a drop to the floor covering them. I look down to the old man, who is now gone and the fire out cold. My vision faded to darkness. I awoke to yell and spotlights. I look around and I'm in the woods. I began noticing familiar faces, who have not a clue of who I am. I notice one man had on a digital watch and inquired the date and time. It is the same date, but he showed me the time. It was still midnight. I explained my story to the men, and they stood confused, appropriate for the given circumstance. Only now I notice, however, a searing pain in my back. A few of the men help me to my feet as they inspect my back. They tell me I had a folklore, 2-inch deep laceration, oozing a black tar-like liquid. I became faint, and as they rushed to grab hold of me, I subsided back into unconsciousness. Now in my bed, back home, awaking to my mother gently shaking me, with a plate of breakfast on my desk. I asked my mom about the trip, explaining what I knew as quickly as I could. All she said to me was, "You always had quite imaginative dreams." I begin to shrug off the whole encounter, disregarding my lack of prior knowledge on the creature, and upon a Google search, the lodge does exist. But I figured it was just circumstantial and made my way to my desk. I sit down, and right before beginning to eat, I notice the bottom of the plate was oozing the same black tar-like liquid. I call out for my mum, as the hair on my neck stands up again. I look to my doorway and my mum just stood there, grinning. I work at a freight company in Southwest Ohio on third shift. I'm the yard guy, which means I move trailers and box trucks around the yard and put them into the docks. We have two poorly lit lots in the back of the building that I frequently have to walk back to, aptly named Backlot 1 and Backlot 2. This is where the semi-trucks are kept for moving the trailers. I usually keep a headphone in one of my ears to listen to podcasts or music. The other ear is left open, so I can hear if people call me over the radio. Anyways, there have been some coyote sightings on the property lately. This is odd because we are in a warehouse district virtually void of any woodland. I have personally seen a coyote in Backlot 1 once or twice, but it usually keeps its distance. The first time, I was in my car driving around the lot to look for trailers left behind. I spotted it out of my driver's side window some ways off. It seemed like a normal coyote, no big deal. The second time seeing the coyote, I was getting out of a semi to hook up a trailer to move. Immediately as I stepped out of the truck, I felt a presence, as if someone was directly behind me. I turned and noticed what looked to be a large, reddish dog staring at me, but from afar, maybe 50 yards away. As I looked closer, I recognized it as the coyote I had spotted before. It was just much larger than I remembered. I also took them for skittish animals. I didn't think that they would stare you down like this. But I shrugged it off as a misjudgment of size from the first time and some territorial behavior. This was around a month or so ago, and I hadn't seen the coyote again, until today. When I was out moving trailers around this morning, I felt that presence again. But this time, That feeling of being watched was amplified by a sense of dread. As if there was a predator actively hunting me. Look, sometimes I can be paranoid. Some of the podcasts that I listen to certainly don't help with that. But knowing this about myself, I tried to put it out of my mind, turned on some music and went about my business. Fast forward to around 2 a.m. I dropped off one of the trailers in backlot 1 and got out of the truck to crank down the dolly legs. That's when I heard someone call my name, Mike. The voice had a bit of a static undertone as it came from the radio. I picked up the radio to call my boss. Anybody call for me? He responded a simple nope. Like I said before, I'm a bit paranoid, but that voice was not imagined. I heard it. This was enough to make me turn off my music until I was done moving trailers in the yard. When I finally finished, it was around 3:45 a.m. and I had to take the semi back to Backlit 2 to drop it off for the driver that comes in later. I finished backing the semi into its spot, and when I turned the engine off and opened the door, I heard a long drawn-out voice call Michael. It sounded a lot like my boss calling me on the walkie-talkie, but more like it was coming through an old record player or phonograph. Not having my music on, I knew right away this wasn't my boss over the radio. The voice had come from directly in front of me. I looked up to see that coyote staring at me. It was a good 75 yards from me at that point, but how had it sounded so close? I thought. The scariest part was it looked like it was smiling, distorting its features so that the edges of its mouth curved to look more human-like. I stared back at the coyote and did the only thing that came to my mind. I yelled at it. Go on, get out of here. The coyote's reaction was not something I would have expected. It began to stand on its hind legs. As it did this, I could hear bones cracking, flesh being contorted and displaced. Its shape became slightly more human, with the exception of its legs and head, but paws dangled from its arms where its hands should be. As it was reaching an upright position, I had already closed the door on the semi, shutting myself back in. The thing's mouth widened into a bigger grin, exposing just how many razor-sharp teeth this thing has. I started the truck thinking my only way out may be to run this thing over and head back to the dock where my co-workers were, as well as some more illumination. I guess this thing took the truck starting as a challenge and it bolted towards me. Its movement was unnatural. It had this awkward gait, but still faster than I've seen any human run. I slammed the gas pedal down and the truck took off. If you've ever seen someone try to gun a semi from idle, then you know I wasn't going very fast at all. Just when I was about to hit this thing, it jumped to the side of the truck, ran to the edge of the backlot 2 and jumped the fence with ease into a small patch of trees. I kept driving and pulled the truck up to our dock for the refuge of the warehouse. As I stepped out of the truck, I could hear a distorted howl from the distance. I quickly looked around the lot from the dock, but I couldn't see anything. Hopefully, that's the last I see of this thing. When I got into the office, my boss asked me why I had brought the semi up to the dock, and I told him that the coyote was back where I was supposed to leave it and I didn't feel safe getting out and walking back. I couldn't tell him what I saw, he wouldn't believe me. I'd be surprised if anyone believes me. I'm afraid to go back to work tonight. I can't even seem to get to sleep now. Every time I close my eyes I see that grin.